Boy, get me another whiskey." The words cut through the elegant chatter of the ballroom. The crowd shifted. Some winced, some snickered, and a few, mostly older men in tuxedos, chuckled along with him. The laughter wasn't friendly. It was sharp, ugly. At the edge of the room, a young black man stood perfectly still in a simple dark suit. No flashy watch, no diamond studs, just a powerful calm. His phone was pressed to his ear, his eyes fixed on the crystal chandelier above. He didn't even blink. The insult was disgusting, but he let it hang in the air. The man, Alastair Finch, a billionaire with a name plastered on hospitals, smirked and nudged his son. "See, they're all the same." His son laughed, then grabbed an empty serving tray from a passing waiter. He walked right up to the black man and shoved it at him. "Since you're not busy, sweetheart, make yourself useful. Take this to the kitchen." Still, the man didn't flinch. He just lowered his phone enough to whisper into it, his voice steady. "Stay on the line. I'll be quick." Then, so quietly no one else could hear, he added, "And cancel the deal. All of it." The son laughed again, louder this time, full of himself. "Come on now, don't be shy. Show us you know where you belong." That line was meant to hurt, to put him in his place. And yet the black man just stood there, anchored in a calm that felt more powerful than their noise. His silence screamed what his voice did not. This is the biggest mistake of your life. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe dignity is not for sale, hit like and subscribe to Black Fables. These stories need to be heard, and we're glad you're here to listen. Now, back to the man they thought they could break.
The ballroom was a palace of glass and gold, but David Adebayo stood apart from it all. No entourage, no flashy jewelry, just a perfectly tailored suit that was worth more than most cars and a phone pressed against his ear. In a sea of old money and champagne, he looked focused, almost dangerously calm, and that was the whole point. His name was David Adebayo, 38 years old, the self-made CEO of Adebayo Industries. He was the mind behind a deal so huge it was set to merge old-world energy with new-world tech. A $900 million deal, with the contracts waiting for one final signature. The very family laughing at him tonight, the Finches, were the partners he had been negotiating with for months through his executive team. But they had never met him in person, not yet. They saw a black man with a quiet confidence and no security detail. They saw someone standing alone, not surrounded by lawyers and assistants. They made up their minds in a heartbeat. He doesn't belong here. David knew they would. He had lived this scene a dozen times. Different countries, different fancy rooms, same ugly tone. At 25, he walked into a London boardroom to pitch his first startup, and the chairman asked him to get everyone coffee. At 32, after landing his first government contract, a rival exec introduced him at a conference as the affirmative action hire. He never forgot the smug look on their faces. Now, at 38, dressed deliberately understated, he was testing the very people who wanted his money, testing whether their respect was real or if their racism would always speak louder. What they didn't know was that the test was already over, and they had failed.
The music in the ballroom tried to reclaim the air, violin straining to smooth over the jagged laughter, but it couldn't. The sound of their mockery was louder. It lived in the corners, in the whispers, in the eyes that darted toward David Adebayo as if he were a stain on their perfect evening. The matriarch of the Finch clan, Eleanor, pearl swaying against her designer dress, raised her voice again. "Truly, who let the staff mingle with the guests?" She said it not as a question, but as a public announcement, her words floating over the polished floors and reaching every ear in the room. Her husband, Alastair, smirked, tugging at his bow tie. "Standards are slipping everywhere these days."
He lifted his glass and a fake toast, and the small circle around them laughed with him. David didn't move. His stillness was a weapon, an anchor against their tide of hate. A young man near the bar paused mid-sip, his eyes narrowed, clearly disturbed. Nearby, a couple dressed in black exchanged a worried glance. The woman shook her head slowly, mouthing, "This isn't right." But the laughter kept rolling. The Finch's son, arrogant and barely 30, leaned back in his chair. "He's just standing there like he owns the place. Someone tell him where the service exit is." That line sent a new ripple through the crowd. Some chuckled nervously, unsure if they should join in. Others shifted on their feet, sensing the cruelty was getting sharper. David's eyes lowered to his phone for just a moment. A text notification blinked on the screen. "Everything's in place, just give the word." He locked it again, his expression a mask of calm. Eleanor clapped once, the sound as sharp as a slap. "Come now, dear, you're blocking our view. Why don't you be useful?" She gestured to an empty glass on their table. The insult was crystal clear.
The laughter swelled, then broke apart into mocking chuckles and cruel whispers. But David Adebayo didn't move. His silence pushed against the noise like a steady, unbreakable wall. He lowered the phone from his ear, not in a hurry, but with calm purpose, slipping it into his suit jacket. Then he clasped his hands loosely in front of him, chin lifted, eyes steady. To anyone watching closely, it was the posture of a man waiting for a storm to pass, not a man begging for mercy. The matriarch, Eleanor, smirked, completely misreading his stillness as surrender. "Oh, he's shy now. Perhaps he finally understands his place." Her friends giggled, clinking their glasses, but not everyone was laughing. Near the dessert table, a young server gripped his silver tray tighter. He'd worked enough of these events to know real class when he saw it. This man didn't move like staff. His calm was so deliberate it was unsettling. By the piano, a couple whispered furiously. "Why doesn't he say something?" the man asked. "Because he doesn't have to," the woman replied, her eyes locked on David. The patriarch, Alistair, feeling bold, leaned forward. "You see, no protest, no denial. That tells you everything, doesn't it?" He sipped his champagne, convinced he had won. But the cameras were telling a different story. Phones glowed in pockets and purses, screens angled up just enough. One guest, pretending to check his messages, was recording every single word. David's breath was even. He had practiced this kind of stillness before, in boardrooms where he was the only black man at the table, in negotiations where silence was used as a weapon against him. Tonight, he was the one wielding it. He remembered being 26 when a bank manager told him his business plan was too ambitious for someone like him. He had held his tongue then, too, letting the man talk long enough to reveal every ugly prejudice inside him. That memory kept him steady now. Silence wasn't weakness, it was rope. The longer they talked, the more tightly they were tying the noose for themselves. They think his silence is guilt, but it's actually a trap. Now Eleanor Finch is about to make the biggest mistake of the night by calling for security. The bystanders stop whispering and start acting, and the first crack in the Finch family's perfect world begins to show. You don't want to miss this. The air in the ballroom had shifted. What began as cruel laughter was now something else, uneasy, fractured, full of eyes darting from David to the Finch family and back again. At the far corner, a young man in a tailored suit pulled out his phone. He angled it casually, the screen glowing against his palm. The red dot blinked, recording. He whispered to his friend, "If this goes viral, people need to see how it started." His friend nodded, eyes never leaving the scene. By the staircase, a woman in her late 20s clutched her purse tighter. She turned to the guest beside her, her voice low but firm. "This is disgusting. He hasn't said a word, and they're humiliating him." The other woman frowned, replying, "Then say something."
Her lips trembled, but she stepped forward anyway, raising her voice just enough for those nearby to hear. "He isn't bothering anyone. Leave him alone." The words sliced through the laughter. A ripple moved across the ballroom. The matriarch, Eleanor, blinked, surprised. The son, Richard, rolled his eyes, muttering, "Great, a sympathizer." But the atmosphere had changed, the first crack in the chorus of mockery. The young server by the dessert table finally set his tray down. His hands shook slightly, but his voice carried. "I work here, sir, and he's not one of us." Gasps followed, sharp and scattered. Guests turned their heads, murmuring, calculating. The patriarch, Alistair, scoffed loudly. "Oh, please, a waiter's word means nothing here." But his voice wavered just enough for people to notice. Near the bar, two men whispered fiercely, "Are you filming?" "Yeah, but should we?" "If you don't, this disappears." Their cameras lifted higher, screens glowed brighter. What had been quiet documentation was becoming bold, visible. David remained still, hands clasped, gaze unwavering. He didn't speak, but his silence amplified the voices rising around him. The room was no longer laughing. It was listening. Their words have failed, and their power is slipping. Backed into a corner, the Finch family is about to do something unthinkable. An act so ugly it will be seen by thousands online in seconds. The final insult is delivered, and David Adebayo finally breaks his silence. The consequences will be immediate and catastrophic. You've come this far, don't miss the epic conclusion.
The ballroom had become a stage. The patriarch, Alistair, slammed his empty glass on the table, the sound cracking through the tense air. "If he won't leave, then make him useful," he boomed, his face red with fury. He thrust the glass toward David. "Pour." The son, Richard, picked up the cue instantly. He grabbed a fresh flute of champagne, strutted forward, and shoved it in David's direction. "Go on," he sneered. "Show us you know your place." Gasps erupted. Someone muttered, "Did he just—" Another voice answered, "Yes, he did." Frustrated by David's unbreakable calm, Richard tipped the glass. A splash of golden champagne hit the dark fabric of David's suit. Not enough to stain, but enough to humiliate. The crowd gasped as one. "That's assault," someone shouted from the back. Phones rose higher. The red glow of recording lights, now a forest of tiny, angry eyes. David's gaze lowered to the droplet on his sleeve. He exhaled once, slow and controlled. Then he lifted his eyes, locking them on Richard, his calm so absolute it made the younger man take a half-step back. Then David moved. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and pressed a single button. Speakerphone. His assistant's voice filled the ballroom, crisp and merciless. "Sir, as per your command, Carter Global Holdings has officially terminated the $900 million partnership with the Finch family. The press release is live. All stakeholders have been notified." The patriarch staggered, his face draining of all color. What is this?" he stammered. David lowered the phone, his own voice finally cutting through the silence, low and sharp as a razor. "You asked me who let me in here," he said, his eyes on Alistair. "My name is David Adebayo, CEO of Adebayo Industries. The deal you just lost? I am the deal." The room exploded. A woman screamed. Eleanor clutched her pearls, her mouth open in a silent O of horror. David looked at her. "You weren't mistaken about who I was," he said coldly. "You were comfortable. Comfortable in your prejudice. That comfort just cost you everything." He turned and walked toward the exit as applause erupted around him. At the door he paused and looked back at the shattered family. "Remember this," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Power isn't shouting insults in a crowded room. It's the silence that follows when you take everything away." And with that he was gone, leaving them to drown in the ruin they had made for themselves.